It's time for basketball, and Uber Eats is dropping deals on game day favorites to keep you locked in on the action. Like when you're craving a buzzer beater, but also buffalo wings. Or when an upset makes you want to ugly cry into a pizza. And right now, Uber Eats has game day deals from Burger King, Buffalo Wild Wings, KFC, and hundreds more local favorites. So you can keep your eyes on the ball and your hands on a burger. Order now, only on Uber Eats. Product availability varies by region. See app for details.
At T-Mobile, our critical mission is providing unparalleled 5G coverage for when connectivity is mission critical. Introducing T-Priority, America's best 5G network experience for first responders, even in times of congestion. More capacity, faster speeds, better coverage. T-Priority from T-Mobile, built for tomorrow's emergencies, ready today. Discover more at t-priority.com.
For qualifying organizations on eligible rate plans, coverage not available in some areas and may be impacted by emergencies.
Hello and welcome to I Talk to Ghosts, the podcast that would walk through spider webs to find you the best ghost stories to share with you. I'm your haunted host, Jennifer, a spirit medium and a teller of those spooky ghost stories. Tonight, dear listener, we are celebrating the 150th episode of I Talk to Ghosts. That's a lot of goosebumps and spirit readings. I thought I would celebrate with a collection of my favorite ghost stories over the years. So light a candle, settle in, and I'll tell you some ghost stories. Here is my dad's story, as I remember it being told to me. My dad, some of his brothers, and some friends were out hunting, camping, and exploring. After a while, the sky began to cloud over and darken, and it started to pour down rain. They were going to go ahead and try and make it home, or find a spot on the way to wait out the storm, when they saw an old 3-story house out in the woods. They had never seen this house before, but thought that if they were at home, whoever lived there probably wouldn't mind if they waited there until the storm passed, or at least subsided a bit. When they went to knock on the door and got no answer, they noticed it was unlocked. They looked through the windows and saw how dusty it was, with what furnishings that were left were sagging from age. They decided, in this situation, it probably wouldn't matter if they went inside until the rain stopped. Since it was only early evening, they left their bedrolls and gear in the front room, looked around downstairs, then went upstairs and looked around the second and third floors of the house. The one detail I remember is the beautiful staircase with its carved banisters. As it had started getting dark, they went downstairs and, upon deciding to spend the night, they laid out their bedrolls, lied down, and kept talking to each other. Then, they all heard what sounded like chains rattling and dragging on the floor, and something moaning and crying. My dad said it sounded like it was walking from the top floor and coming down the staircase. They all jumped up and grabbed their stuff when they saw her at the top of the stairs on the second floor landing. And she was coming down to the front room where they were. It was a woman in a long white dress. She had chains wrapped around her, which were dragging down the stairs with every step she took, and she was moaning and crying. But the worst thing, the thing which sent them fleeing out the front door into the cold, dark, rainy night, was that she had no head. A headless, chain-dragging, moaning, crying ghost in a white dress. He said they ran through the woods without stopping until they got home. At the age of 12, I had a best friend named Tanya. During the time I knew Tanya, we went through many a strange experience. But here's one I will say I remember the most. Tanya and her family ended up moving in with her mom's boyfriend into his 3-story house in the heart of our small town. Her boyfriend, Roger, lived by himself, so that made room for Tanya, her little sister, and her mom. When Tanya first moved into the house, she would make remarks to me all the time like, something is weird about this house. I can't put my finger on it, but it's there. Tanya's mom and her boyfriend worked the night shift at a local factory, so that left Tanya to babysit her younger sister. During the day, Tanya and I would either talk for hours on the phone or I would be there. After about a month of living there, Tanya said, "When I watch my sister during the day and I let her go outside, I can hear things in the attic. It's like someone is walking around or moving something. And when I go up there, no one's there and nothing has been moved." Tanya was not one to lie, so from then on we began to observe the house. She was right. You could hear conversations of a woman and a man in the attic. It was a very intense conversation, almost an argument. You could never understand the words, but you could feel the tension in the air. Unafraid or thinking we were invincible, we would still go up there and look around, even making suggestions to whatever it was to come out and show itself. One night, Tanya and I had been roller skating in the basement and decided to come up to get something to eat. I was still downstairs taking off my skates, and Tanya was sitting at the top of the stairs. Tanya came down to the bottom of the stairs and said to me, "Something's in the attic. Come with me." Someone or something had opened the attic door and turned on the light while Tanya was at the top of the stairs. The upper stairs were around the corner from the other, so you could tell if the door was being opened. When we got to the top of the stairs, there was nothing there, and the light had been turned off. That night I slept over. Tanya and I laid awake while we listened to the sounds of furniture and arguing in the attic. Almost a week later, Tanya's little sister woke up in the middle of the night screaming about a nightmare she just had. She told us she had dreamed she had woke up in the middle of the night to find a man with red hair and black eyes standing in her doorway. He told her that his name was Gabe and he was going to take all her toys away and harm her mother. We had never mentioned our concerns about the house, the attic, the basement, or the man because we knew that if we did, we'd be in deep trouble with Tanya's mom. There were many events that happened in that house that would make cold chills run up and down your spine, but the one that sticks out in my mind was, fittingly, on Halloween. Tanya and I got dressed up in our costumes and prepared the house with candles while her parents took her little sister out trick-or-treating. My sister had come over so we could go to the local haunted house. My sister was in the bathroom putting on makeup, and Tanya and I decided to walk to the nearest houses to get some candy. Right before we left, we made it a point to go upstairs to the attic to tease the unknown once again. I was in a boastful mood, Halloween being my favorite holiday and all, so my words were along the lines of, "All right, it's Halloween. It's your time to show yourself. We're not afraid of you." Laughing and scared, we ran downstairs and left to go trick-or-treating. Tanya and I were walking back to the house when my older sister came running out of the house, crying hysterically. We ran up to her and asked her what was wrong. Between sobbing and shaking, she managed to get out, "Where have you been? Someone or something is in that house!" We asked her what happened, and she said when she was in the bathroom, the attic door opened and the light turned on. Whoever it was walked all the way around the house. They stopped and started banging on her bathroom door. Then they went back into the attic and turned off the light and slammed the door. We left the house that night and Tanya came home with me. A few months later, Tanya and her family moved, and now there's another family living in the house. I wonder if they ever met the ghosts. I really don't believe much in the paranormal, so something really tangible would have to jump out at me and bite me before I would believe it. But this was very convincing, and I believe it to be true. This happened recently at a Halloween party. I was invited to my friend's party at his house, and some of the guys decided to crash at his place because we'd never seen the fog outside so thick before, and it seemed to have rolled in from nowhere. My friend always told me that his house was haunted and that he would only stay at the house on weekends. Since Halloween was on a Friday, he decided to have a party there. Usually, he'd be staying at his grandmother's while his parents stayed at that house. Honestly, the house seemed very normal and quite homey. That night, we decided to stay up a bit and hear the stories about the house. This house had gone through 4 owners, and the previous 3 owners had tragic ends. Their first owner committed suicide, and later his wife and children died from a car accident. The second owner committed suicide, and his girlfriend died in a car accident. Third owner, well, he died in a crash, and his wife ended her life. I know, coincidences can happen. That's what I thought too. The first incident for us happened around 1 a.m. While we were talking, we heard someone knocking on the front door. His parents weren't home, so it was just me, him, and 2 other guys. The others had decided to brave it home despite the fog. At first, I thought some of them had returned because the fog was too much. My friend who lived there, though, started to shake. He went on to tell me that it was the ghost. I thought it was a silly thing to assume. It could be trick-or-treaters or people from the party returning, but he insisted it was the ghost in the door. He said that's how it always starts. I decided to open the door. As soon as I opened it, the knocking stopped. I thought it was strange, and some of the things my friend said started to bother me, but I shook it off the best I could. While I was walking away from the door, the knocking started again. Now I was sure it was trick-or-treaters pranking us. I opened the door, but this time, the door knocking continued. I was standing there, looking at the door, while I could hear knocking noises coming from it, and no one was there. That freaked me out good. I slammed the door and ran back to where my friends were. I told them what happened, and we decided maybe we should all leave. The door started knocking again, but when we went to look this time, it was not even there. As we were walking towards the doorway where the door was supposed to be, the door came sliding down the stairs with a loud crash. We turned around and saw the door on the floor. How the heck, was my response. And when we turned around, the door was back in place, in the doorway. We turned around again and saw no door on the ground, just a mark left by the door when it came crashing down the stairs. As we left the house, everything went crazy. We could hear furniture tossing back and forth, lights all over the house going haywire. Even neighbors came to inquire what was going on. All we could see was things being thrown and lights turning on and off, while neighbors and my friends looked on. About 15 minutes later, it went quiet. A police officer pulled up and asked what was the problem. The neighbors and I told him what happened, and he decided to investigate. He told us to stay outside while he checked it out. 10 minutes later, he came back and reported there was nothing wrong. The neighbors and my friends decided we'd have a closer look, and we found everything to be in order. Nothing was out of place. What was different about this is it was witnessed by more than 20 people, and it's in a police report. I know it's strange, but after the door was taken out of the house, everything stopped. The house is quiet, according to my friend. And the door? It's in some garage somewhere. I really don't care. As far as I'm concerned, that door is gone for good. I really don't know the history behind that door, nor does my friend, but it had been part of the house ever since the first owner. This story took place when I was about 14. I'm 22 now, and the memory still scares me to the point of chills. My friend had a huge slumber party for her birthday. Her house was very old and was rumored to once be part of the Underground Railroad. Her attic was a series of rooms that mirrored her downstairs, except one that had a hole cut out of the floor. It looked like a tunnel led from it and went about 3 feet back before it was blocked off with rubble and bricks. She would always tell us stories of weird stuff that happened in her house. Her room had the stairs to the attic attached to it, and she would hear sounds coming from up there, like people walking around. And once her electric keyboard turned on its own, it was playing Old Susanna on repeat, which is kind of strange because her name is Susan. We, being a bunch of teenage girls, decided to play that silly game light as a feather, stiff as a board. We were all sitting around in a circle with candles, concentrating on getting one of the girls to float. Then suddenly, the room we were in dropped in temperature, and the candles all flickered at once, like there was a breeze in the room when there wasn't. We screamed, and all 10 of us piled onto her couch. That's when we heard a loud boom in the closet connected to the room we were sitting in. Almost at the same time, we saw a dark shadow run across the wraparound porch out front. We watched it move through the windows, and at one point, it passed right by where we were all sitting. Strangely, we didn't hear any footsteps. The shadow stopped at the front door, and that's when we realized that the door wasn't locked. I decided to be the brave one and jumped up and ran and locked the door. When I did this, I could clearly see out the window, and no one was there. I flicked on the lights on the way back to the couch, and we slowly got our nerves back. Eventually, we opened the door to the closet to investigate what could have caused the noise earlier, and saw that a coat rack had been knocked over by something. None of us could fall asleep that night, and needless to say, I never spent the night at her house again.
Este episodio es presentado por Honda. Descubra la nueva Honda Passport Trail Sport todoterreno. La Passport más todoterreno que Honda haya imaginado jamás. Esta Passport cuenta con mayor altura al suelo, barras de techo en todas sus versiones y neumáticas especialmente diseñados para cualquier terreno. Además, disfruta todos tus viajes con el control de clima de 3 zonas, techo panorámico y opciones como asientos delanteros con calefacción y ventilación. Conoce más en honda.com/passport.
Still getting around to that fix on your car? You got this. On eBay, you'll find millions of parts, guaranteed to fit. Doesn't matter if it's a major engine repair or your first time swapping your windshield wipers. eBay has that part you need, ready to click perfectly into place. For changes big and small. Loud or quiet. Find all the parts you need at prices you'll love. Guaranteed to fit every time. But you already know that. eBay. Things, people, love. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply.
After the first year working at the local hospital in radiology, I began to hear stories about a ghost in the basement file room. Every hospital has file rooms where the older patient film cases are stored before they leave the facility to go to a special warehouse. Back then, I would, quite frequently, go down to the basement to pull basket loads of film folders for patients to pick up for upcoming appointments, surgery cases, or doctor's case presentations. One night, I was in the basement room pulling a lot of files for an upcoming presentation. I was busy filling a bin when I heard a slight noise over by the desk area. I was right in the line of a workstation where I could see the tall office chair and the computer. I heard the office chair squeak like someone just moved it or turned it around. Out of the corner of my eye, I could clearly see a man about 5'8", dark hair, well-dressed with dark pants, wearing a long lab coat with a stethoscope draped around his neck and his hand on the back of the office chair. I turned to face him to ask him if I could help him. Just as I faced him straight on, he disappeared right in front of me, leaving the chair he had his hand on twirling around. I stood there blinking and trying to rationalize what had just happened. I recalled the story that other girls in the office had told me. I hadn't taken them too seriously at the time. I finished the work I was doing as quickly as I could. When I got back upstairs to the office, it must have shown on my face. One of my coworkers noticed right away. She came up alongside me and whispered, "Did you meet the doctor?" I nodded my head in confirmation. I wanted to know if they knew who he was. My coworker shrugged. They didn't really know, but that he must have been a previous doctor that possibly worked there many years ago. From 1995 to 1997, I lived in a small terraced house in Carlisle, England, with my then boyfriend. We had quite an unhappy relationship, and I spent most of the time there avoiding him and camping out in the bedroom studying. I was studying for a degree at the time. For my birthday, he gave me some money to go out and buy something for myself. And being interested in antiques, I bought a picture that I had seen for many weeks and was drawn to. It was a Victorian print on glass of a woman with a small dog and some religious script which I never was able to translate. From the time I bought it and put it up in my bedroom, there was a feeling of disquiet in the house that I hadn't noticed before. My relationship failing, I met another man and started to quietly see him. Unfortunately, every time he came to my house, there would be cold winds blowing and something always on the peripheral of your vision that you couldn't quite see when you looked directly, but seemed to be watching us. As a thorough skeptic, I dismissed most of it as atmosphere, living in the north, etc. However, I did mention the picture and asked him to come and see it. He agreed to come upstairs to my bedroom. Before you ask, it wasn't a come up and see my etchings type of move. He came upstairs with much trepidation and saw the picture. As he stepped into the room, he felt like he was, and this is his words, stepping between the carriages of a moving train, from one place to another. And when he saw the picture, he just froze. He fled downstairs, hyperventilating, and although I could feel the cold and the presence, I was calm throughout. He finally settled his nerves, and he explained the reason why he was so spooked was that the woman in the picture was me. I looked and I realized he was absolutely right, that there was a startling resemblance. Now, you may say that this was just subconscious suggestion, and in the end, when I moved out of the house, we took the picture with us to where we live now and settled happily together. He still can't look at the picture, but it seems to have changed now, and it doesn't look like me anymore. Is it possible for a picture to give out emotions or change temperature? Personally, I'm skeptical about ghosts in general. However, I do believe what happens in a place or around an object can give rise to memories which last long after the event. My grandmother died about 20 years ago. About 2 weeks after she passed away, I was hanging out over at my parents' place, and my mom got a phone call. No number, no unknown number, just a blank caller ID. She answered the phone, got quiet, hung up, and went to her room without saying anything. When I finally got her to talk about it, she said it was her mother, saying she was trapped and to please come get her because they wouldn't let her leave, over and over again. And then the phone disconnected. I asked her about it a few years ago, and she denied that it happened for a bit, and then admitted that it had happened 2 more times that year, and then stopped. But she didn't want to discuss it anymore. Last year, I was walking to my friend's house at a very late hour. My friend happens to live a block past an abandoned morgue. I passed by the morgue to find my friend sitting on its old concrete steps. He seemed distracted, as if listening carefully. I asked him what he was doing there, and he shushed me that noises were coming from inside the building, which was extremely disturbing for an abandoned place where there were not supposed to be any people at all. We heard things being moved and dragged all over the morgue. Then, unexpected knocks and scratching. We braved investigating and peeked into some of the windows and saw chairs and a desk moving around in an otherwise empty room. The 2 of us felt extremely uneasy and backed away from the windows and into the dark lawn. We stood there in silence, not quite knowing what to do with our thoughts. Movement caught my eye, and I glanced at a darkened window. There was a girl there staring back at me. She was pale, with an emotionless expression, and she had pure black eyes, and her nose was missing. She stood there for a solid 3 seconds before she vanished into thin air. I promptly turned and walked away towards my friend's house, tears threatening to run down my face. My friend followed me and asked me what was wrong, and I told him. He had not seen the girl. I can't walk past that morgue after this experience, and still to this day I avoid walking that way, even in the daylight. I have never been so terrified in my life, and it all has completely changed how I think about the paranormal. And with that, dear listener, we have reached the end of this episode of I Talk to Ghosts. I hope you've enjoyed all the ghost stories that I shared with you this evening. Did you have a favorite? I would love to know, so please reach out. In the meantime, wherever you wander off to in this world or the next, just remember, come back and visit with me. Have a lovely evening and good night.
If you enjoy stories of the paranormal and the unexplained, join me for They're Not Shadows. As I got out of the car, lightning lit up the sky. The trees making a jagged display through the rain. they're not shadows. It's a spooky good time.
Hello? Are you okay?
Fear Daily is a podcast that takes you into the shadows of the past, unearthing the 1990s most terrifying tales of monsters, madness, and life after death. Discovered on a forgotten bulletin board server somewhere in Pennsylvania's Rust Belt, these stories are an archive of humanity's strangest encounters with the unknown as told by the people who experienced them. Written by Brennan Storr, creator of the Ghost Story Guys, and hosted by Brandon Schecksnyder of Southern Gothic, Fear Daily is your window into the dark corners of our world. Follow Fear Daily today on your favorite podcatcher to receive new episodes Monday through Friday each and every week.